Banjo-Kazooie is a 1998 collector font with a lot of different collectibles. Some are essential to progress, others power your moves, and some extend your health or grant extra lives. My question is, can you beat Banjo-Kazooie without collecting feathers or eggs, and without using any glitches? So the optimal word here is collecting. I don't count being given them, I just can't pick them up myself. It's just like how most adult men don't buy themselves socks, they just get given them at Christmas. I have never shown my age more with a comparison. But what I mean is that we can learn the egg firing move in Mumbo's Mountain, flight in Treasure Trove Cove, invincibility in Clanker's Cavern, and even the beak bomb in Freezeezy Peak. But once we use those initial amounts of feathers and eggs that Bottles gives us, that's it. We can't get any more. Now there's a way to make this challenge a lot easier, which is going to see Cheeto and getting the free codes for the sandcastle room. This would double our capacity and refill all of our eggs and feathers, but we're going to try to avoid that for now. Besides, we still actually have to reach Cheeto in all three of his locations. The reason I'm doing this challenge and not trying to avoid using eggs or feathers altogether is that you need both in the final boss, so I kind of already know that challenge isn't doable. I'm writing this bit beforehand, but I think this challenge will prove to be strangely doable. I might need to work out how many eggs are needed for the Grunty fight to make sure I have them, and perhaps I'll need to save as many gold feathers for that as possible just because of the homing attacks. But other than that, my only worries going in are the pathways in Rusty Bucket Bay, and places where it's impossible to go through without picking up eggs or feathers. I'm going to be collecting as many notes and jiggies as possible as well. Whilst I can't collect any of the refills outside the final battle, I might still be able to get double health if I can get enough jiggies and notes on the way. I'm saving after each level so an accidental touch of an egg or a feather is a level reset. If I do it in the lair, I go back to wherever I last saved, which might include redoing a level I just left. So for this reason I'm going to be playing the original N64 version, because on the Xbox version I think it might autosave and ruin the run. With the eggs and feathers I have, it will be a case of rationing and seeing what I can get without using eggs and feathers at all. There'll also be a case of being accurate and wasting as little as possible. Anyway, with that explained, let's see if we can beat Banjo-Kazooie without collecting any eggs or feathers. Oh, and I'm Phill, by the way. I don't think I actually introduced myself there. Well, anyway. I started off by waking up and learning that my sister's been kidnapped. We told Bottles to give us our moves and we headed out. Spiral Mountain is the same as normal because there's no eggs or feathers just yet. So I collected the 6 empty honeycombs and moved on. This run only really begins in Mumbo's Mountain, and it doesn't start too difficult. In Mumbo's Mountain it's possible to get most jiggies as normal. When I arrived I headed straight over to Conga's area, collecting notes on the way. When I arrived I collected both the jiggy from getting Conga to throw oranges at the pads, and also the jiggy from giving Chimpy the orange. I then manoeuvred my way onto the ledge, avoiding the eggs, and I learned the egg move. Bottles gave us the generous gift of 50 eggs. We need to make these last. Next I continued as normal, learning the Talon Trot and Beak Buster moves, plus collecting Jinjos and Jiggies near the huts and in the stone ruin area. I then went back and managed to avoid the eggs again to hit the first witch switch. After that I chose to access the first of my rations, using 4 eggs to do the Juju statues. Maybe I'll regret it later, but it gets me 1 more jiggy and an empty honeycomb, so it seemed like a worthwhile trade. I went to see Mumbo and turned into a termite, and I was able to do everything as usual there. Ultimately I got everything in Mumbo's Mountain, except the jiggy which requires you to fire eggs at Conga. I decided to leave that for now. This level is pretty straightforward and makes a good introduction to the challenge run. Heading up the slope and deeper into the layer, I encountered no difficulties, and in the next level it again starts as every playthrough does. A big challenge in Treasure Trove Cove is trying to remember what chests have inside them before leaping in, as you can't always get the camera in the right position to show you. This means that I might end up missing some Mumbo tokens or something if I can't confirm which chests they're inside. Whilst I play this game a lot, I still don't really remember what's inside every single chest. I started off in the level by fighting Nipper, which is the same as usual, and then going to the pirate ship. Here I learned flight and got my precious 25 red feathers from Bottles. Aside from having to jump over the feathers to get the Jinjo, this was all pretty straightforward stuff. I rescued the treasure for Captain Blubber, and I went over to Bottles to learn the spring step. The Jiggy on the alcove takes some focus as you need to avoid the eggs hanging in midair, but this is easily doable. Next, I headed off on foot to collect the notes of the level. I noticed as I walked around that a lot of the flight pads here have feathers on them, so I won't be able to use them at all. Broadly speaking, flying short distances will be fine in this challenge, as you don't actually use any feathers to take off, just to go higher. But if there's feathers above the flight pad, we won't be able to avoid them. I collected the empty honeycomb under the water, although I got a bite from Snacker on the way. I then swam down and got the Jiggy in the rock pool. Next, I made my first big error of the run. I decided to drop down to get one of the Jiggies that usually requires following a side path, because I knew there were eggs on it. However, I misjudged and dropped next to it. No problem, I thought, I'll just avoid the eggs and... ah, damn it. First reset. The second time round I got everything as I did before, including learning both moves, and also this time I picked up the second empty honeycomb whilst I was in that part of the level. This time everything went a lot smoother. I was able to get the hidden treasure Jiggy by following the arrows on foot, which is fine, it just takes a bit longer. I swam into the sunken sandcastle to get the notes to avoid using any eggs. I was able to fly without using up any feathers to get the Jiggy in the chest, and then I flew to the opposite side and got everything on the lighthouse whilst avoiding all the eggs. I also got all the Jinjos. Whilst they didn't prove to be an issue this time, the enemies here could have been a problem, because if they had hit me I'd have dropped eggs and feathers, which is something I can't afford to do. I finished this level with 9 out of 10 Jiggies, but pretty much everything else, and I moved on. The way to the next level was reasonably straightforward. I made a detour down this pipe to open one end of this cauldron warp. This is a time saver in a normal run, but it turned out to be really essential in this one for a reason that will become clear later. I also opened Bubble Gloop Swamp whilst avoiding the eggs that line the path up to the jigsaw. Clanker's Cavern is the next step up in terms of challenge, as there's a lot more annoyingly placed items to avoid. The opening area was pretty simple, and you can collect the notes on the pipes whilst avoiding the feathers and eggs. You can also get the Mumbo token above the entrance, which is good to know for when it comes time to leave. I always hated doing the bit where you raise Clanker as a kid, but in this challenge it's straightforward as there's no pesky eggs or feathers down in the depths. By and large, this level just has a few sections where you have to really avoid feathers and eggs. You can open the panel on the wall here with the rat-a-tat wrap so you don't have to use eggs. Inside Clanker you can hit the witch switch and then trial and error your way through the spinning blades to get this Jiggy. I then completed the Hoop Challenge Jiggy and realised I actually might not even be able to learn invincibility, as there's a gold feather in the doorway. I decided to leave this for now. Next, I got a few more Jiggies in this first run, including the one above the blowhole, and I decided next to go through this pipe to fight the Muty Snippets and get that Jiggy. Upon arrival, fighting the Muty Snippets was straightforward. After I beat them, I thought I had plenty of space to get the Jiggy as well, but... and that was a reset. So I basically did everything the same in my second run, although probably not in the same order. I beat the Muty Snippets this time and decided just to leave the Jiggy and focus on the notes. Straight after that I climbed up one of the edges, remembering there was an empty honeycomb around here somewhere. However, I forgot what else was in the pipe. Damn, that was my second reset. So, attempt number 3, let's keep this one brief. I was climbing the tail, jumped wrong, and I hit a feather. Attempt number 4, I left the witch switch room the wrong way and forgot about these eggs. So at this point I began wondering, is it possible to get a lot of stuff in Clanker's Cavern? Finally, attempt 5 was here. I did much the same again. I didn't get the Muty Snippet Jiggy, I still couldn't figure out a way to get the invincibility move, which also has a Jiggy behind it, and I decided for now to leave the Jiggy behind Clanker's teeth to preserve my eggs, but it's one I could come back to. With a sigh of relief, I finished Clanker's Cavern with 7 Jiggies, 93 notes, and both empty honeycombs. I then took a very cautious walk through Grunty's lair, straight to the already open next level. After Clanker's Cavern, I was feeling a bit nervous about this challenge, but Bubble Gloop Swamp is comparatively straightforward and it's easy to avoid the vast majority of eggs and feathers. From here on, I'll mostly just be talking about the pain points and the missed collectibles. otherwise you can probably assume I grabbed everything. So after I learned to wear welly boots, I decided not to feed the golden crocodiles, also known as the croctus. It takes a few eggs and I was feeling stingy. Plus it's easy to come back for that jiggy later if we need to. I tried to do the race, but I fell on my first attempt, straight into the gold flibbit fight. I'm usually quite lazy for this and just stand still using invincibility and let them kind of clear it for me, but this time I actually had to engage with the fight. It was no problem, and on the second attempt I got the time jiggy as well. Both outside and inside the giant turtle tank top was all okay, getting 2 more jiggies along with the empty honeycomb. The huts were equally straightforward, including the witch switch. I went through towards Mumbo's and saw the next jiggy that would be tough to achieve. The other timed puzzle has eggs all down an extremely slim path. This one might not be doable, and the memories of hitting the egg in the Muty Snippet room in Clanker's Cavern put me off trying. At Mumbo's, I grabbed the empty honeycomb and became a crocodile. As a croc, I cleared the rest of the overworld notes and Jinjos to get another jiggy. I didn't do the Mr. Vile minigame as I wanted to learn the Turbo Talon Trot, so I left with 7 jiggies and pretty much everything else secured. Freezeezy Peak is another reasonably straightforward one in terms of avoiding eggs and feathers, but it had the most jiggies so far that I didn't collect on my first visit, just because of my rationing. Usually I would start this level with the Christmas lights, but this jiggy requires both eggs for the on switch and feathers to fly through the star, so I decided to leave it for now. I also usually get the snowmen out the way early, but again, I'm watching my feather use. So far I haven't used any. Whilst I can't take the snowman out, I do learn the move from Bottles anyway, because it'll be useful later. He didn't give me any extra feathers though. Boo! I also didn't get the jiggy for the buttons on the snowman for the same reason, but I was able to get almost everything else. You have to be careful on the rooftops and scarf to avoid feathers, but otherwise this level's really straightforward. As I expected, I'll need to come back later anyway, so I decided not to do the second boggy race until I have the Turbo Talon Trot. The only notes I didn't get were the 8 which are on top of the snowman, and you have to defeat the snowman for both the witch switch and an empty honeycomb, so there's quite a lot to come back for if I find I have the feathers for it. I'd already passed Gobi Valley's entrance on our way through the lair, so entering the level was pretty uneventful. Once inside, the strategy of using as few eggs and feathers as possible gave me some obstacles, as there's quite a lot you can't do without them. I couldn't help Jinxie as it uses eggs, I didn't go in this temple as it required the beak bomb, and I didn't fly through the hoops for the same reason, or raise the central pyramid. As 2 of the Jinjos are inside these pyramids that I didn't go in, I didn't get all 5 Jinjos either. This also means I only got 78 notes in this level the first time through, and I missed the mid-air honeycomb. So after Gobi's Valley left me with only 6 jiggies and unable to get the witch switch jiggy as well, I decided to take stock at this point and see if I was on the right trajectory for the challenge. In short, not at all. I had somehow dropped a whopping 19 jiggies up to this point, and I still had 3 levels to go. I was only allowed to miss 6 if I wanted to access the final boss. However, of these 19, there were only some that were unreachable due to not being able to pick up feathers and eggs, and there was quite a lot more that I just didn't pick up due to rationing. It's a shame I don't have a source for more feathers and eggs. Or do I? So if you know Banjo-Kazooie, you know that you can enter cheats on the floor of the Sandcastle room, which is a place we've not been in this run yet. And you'll also know about Cheeto, a flying spellbook who's hidden in 3 locations around the lair, and if you find him he gives you cheats that refill your eggs and feathers, and doubles their capacity. You see where I'm going with this. So I know this may be seen by some of you as cheating, so if you consider this cheating, then the answer to the question is no. It's not possible to beat Banjo-Kazooie without touching eggs or feathers. Even if I were to use all that I have to get enough jiggies to reach Grunty, I then wouldn't be able to beat her in the fight because I need at least 44 eggs remaining for that fight. And I was already down to 46 at this point. But if we don't count being given eggs and feathers, just that we can't collect them ourselves, then Cheeto and the Sandcastle become an option. So I figured at this point it was inevitable that I'd have to get Cheeto to give me some help to make this challenge even remotely doable. But I had to reach his hiding spots first. And then after that, I might as well see how many jiggies I can get before I need to seek his help to begin with. So first, let's see if we can get enough jiggies to open Rusty Bucket Bay. With this new objective in mind, I continued onwards to Mad Monster Mansion. Surprisingly, this level is actually one of the easiest ones I've had since early in the game. I still hadn't learned the Wonder Wing, so I couldn't defeat the ghosts as I usually do, but otherwise I pretty much could beat this level as normal. I had one silly reset in my first attempt where I thought it was a Mumbo token behind this chest, but it was actually a gold feather. But otherwise it was Mad Monster Mansion. I snuck up on a ghost, I played the organ, I climbed the church, I became a pumpkin. Classic spooky church stuff. So with all notes, 9 jiggies, and an empty honeycomb, this is our best performance in a while, although we couldn't quite get the witch switch at the top of the church. The only jiggy I didn't get was pooping in the flower pots, but this does mean we have enough jiggies to continue to Rusty Bucket Bay. Whilst raising the water, it's easy enough to avoid the feathers and eggs, and because we're going to be asking Cheeto for a gift, we go and see him as a pumpkin before we transform back to normal. We have just enough jiggies to continue, so let's see how far we can go in Rusty Bucket Bay, and see if we can make it to the other Cheeto locations. Can we open Click Clock Wood? Or can we even complete Grunty's Furnace Fun before we have to pay Cheeto a visit? With the momentum behind me, I then had to pause production of the video for like 3 months. I had this one, then these 5, then this one, and the video's still taken some time since I've been able to restart it again. If you haven't watched any of the videos I've just thrown up, you should. They're all just as entertaining as this one. Unless, of course, you're not enjoying this one, in which case those ones are way better. But if you're still watching at this point, I think you want to see how this one ends. Ahem! Anyway. Rusty Bucket Bay is a notoriously difficult level in parts, so I didn't start optimistic. But I also couldn't think of any jiggies that specifically required eggs and feathers. Instead I thought the difficulty would come more from navigating the level, as we can't pay the tolls if we're rationing our eggs. Although, now we know we'll be going to Cheeto, we can always do it knowing we'll get some more back later. I actually ended up doing this level a few times, mostly resetting due to death, so I'll just focus on the final run through I did. I started out by visiting the ship, as when I play this level my first stop is always the engine room. In the Nintendo 64 version, as you have to recollect all notes when you die, it's always the way that makes the most sense to me. This was where I had the most restarts, all due to deaths, but then I managed to hit the switches, collect the first jiggy in the engine room itself, then I ran to the back of the boat and collected that jiggy as well. To be honest, this level is quite straightforward once you beat the engine room. The only place on the boat that gave me any trouble was this area of the shelves covered in eggs and feathers, preventing me from getting these notes. But in an early attempt I realised I could get 3 of the notes by clipping through the floor, with 2 I couldn't quite manage to reach. I then went on to grab everything on the boat aside from that. I usually take an incredibly lazy approach to the boss fight with the box, and just use Wonder Wing whilst it destroys itself, but since I haven't learned that move yet, I actually had to fight it. I realise, as I'm recording this, that I use this exact same description when I was fighting the frogs in Bubble Gloop Swamp. I'm just really lazy when I play this game, I guess. Anyway, let's get back to the script. Next I was back on land working out if I had to use these egg tolls to extend the bridges. But I actually managed to avoid using all but one of them by using the 2 cranes to get around and the ladders out of the water. I also hit the witch switch on top of the boat. The only bridge I eventually had to do was the one to get the orange Jinjo, using a total of 8 eggs. If you could find a way to get this Jinjo without paying the toll, then this entire level would be doable without using any eggs whatsoever. I finished the level with all 10 jiggies for the first time in this challenge, plus 98 notes and one of the 2 empty honeycombs. I now have a full health bar, so empty honeycombs are going to be less important going forward. But overall, I'm really happy with how this level's turned out. Whilst it took a few attempts, I'm not sure I could have done much better, to be honest. After leaving Rusty Bucket Bay, I visited Cheeto for another code and made my way to the area of the entrance to Click Clock Wood. Usually I would use invincibility to go down the path lined with whiplash, but I haven't learned it yet, so I just brute forced my way down the corridor. I then immediately opened the cauldron warp. The reason it's so important in this run is so that you don't have to do that corridor bit with the whiplash more than once. So as we've worked out that we can't quite beat the game with just the eggs and feathers that Bottles gives us, the question now becomes, how many jiggies can we get with our default supply of eggs and feathers? I went in thinking, probably most of them, so I was happy to continue without visiting the sandcastle just yet. As I was only a single jiggy short of Click Clock Wood, I decided to pick up a simple one I skipped earlier, namely pooping in all the flower pots in Mad Monster Mansion, which I assumed would be simple until I came across an important question for a run of this kind. Does it count if I pick up my own pooped eggs? I decided that if it triggers the text box for picking up an egg, then it counts, and so actually this ended up taking a few attempts. After this, I went back to the jigsaw and opened up the final world. I have 33 eggs left and 25 red feathers. Let's go to Click Clock Wood. I was kind of surprised I made it this far, to be honest, so I was curious to see how far I could go. I entered Spring and began what's probably my favourite banjo level, and if I'm honest, it was probably the most fun I've had doing this challenge. There are plenty of eggs and feathers to avoid, sure, but it all feels immensely doable, and adds to the platforming challenge which is so prominent in this level. A big part of it is that each season has eggs and feathers in different places, so you do need to stay on your toes. I had a reset early on due to a pooped egg bouncing back when I was growing the plant, and then I had another one the first time I was climbing the tree and trying to avoid the eggs. But after these, I made pretty good progress, collecting notes and avoiding feathers and eggs, which are pretty persistently everywhere. I made my way through each season, collecting almost everything first time. There were 4 notes I didn't collect, as I didn't know the Wandering move and therefore couldn't get them from the snare bear, but otherwise I got all the notes. I managed to collect enough Mumbo tokens to become a bee, so I actually did manage everything. Before I finished, I went back to winter and used a feather to take out a snowman sitting atop the witch switch. I then became a bee once again and left the level having collected all 10 jiggies and 96 notes. I didn't pick up either of the empty honeycombs because I don't need them, and this marks my first feather usage of the entire run. After my first visit to each level, I am now just 14 jiggies short of beating the game and 18 short of double health. I have enough notes to reach the final boss, but if I can get 25 more then I can access the final note door, which contains the double health jigsaw. I have enough empty honeycombs now for full health, as the last 6 don't actually do anything in this game. I now have the option to go to Grunty's Furnace Fun if I want to, but I guess first it's time to head back through old levels, starting with if we can finally learn the Wonder Wing. I won't do any kind of transitions between these levels, but this is how my follow-up visits went. In Clanker's Cavern, I first went once again to the Muty snippets, and with some well-spaced jumps I got the jiggy. I then realised, much to my embarrassment, that I could have avoided the gold feather on this ledge, just by using a single feather. I didn't use the Wonder Wing move to get the jiggy, and it ended up killing me. I guess if you wanted to do this run with a rule around resetting when you die, then you could use some gold feathers here and it wouldn't be a problem because we're going to get a full restock when we go to the sandcastle. Finally, I grabbed the last jiggy, which is the one from Clanker's teeth. Not being the most on target with eggs, but again, I know I'm going to get some more. So in Clanker's Cavern, I used 1 extra red feather and 5 extra eggs. In Bubble Gloop Swamp, I fed all 5 Croctus using 7 eggs, as I wasn't perfect with my shots, and I beat Mr. Violet's own game. I wanted to go to the final Cheeto, but I forgot I hadn't cleared this ice cube out of the way, so I came back to clear it. Oh f***. I genuinely forgot this feather was here. This is not good for the run, as it means I can't get the last Cheeto code, and it's probably the most important one. The Cheeto the other side of this passage gives the code blue eggs, and we need eggs more than anything. So this isn't necessarily the end of the run. You'll see what I mean, but it will definitely add another caveat to the run if we eventually succeed. At this point I want to continue to see what this run has for me, and rest assured the main part of this challenge, which is not collecting any feathers or eggs, will stay intact. In Freezeezy Peak I defeated the snowman, getting all jiggies except the one for lighting up the Christmas tree. Whilst I could get the jiggy to appear, I don't think I can navigate my way to the top due to eggs. I also collected all 100 notes, beating my previous record of 92. Annoyingly, in my first run, I didn't save between Freezeezy Peak and Gobi's Valley, and then I discovered that I didn't have enough eggs and feathers to clear the desert. The whole effort ended up being for naught anyway, as I picked up a feather whilst trying to remember where the notes were. It was a really rookie move, as I forgot there's nothing but red feathers on Gobi's little island. It then took me a bunch of attempts to have another good run through Freezeezy Peak, as I wasted too many feathers on the snowman. Eventually, in my final run, I used 15 red feathers, 1 gold feather because I hit the wrong button, and no additional eggs. And I also hit the witch switch. It turns out I'll need to visit Cheeto before going back to Gobi's Valley, so I decided to change up my order a bit. In my third and final visit to Mad Monster Mansion, I used 5 feathers to get to the top of the church and hit the witch switch. I then used 3 eggs to clear the cobwebs, and I collected the Jiggy in the witch's eye. I didn't have quite enough feathers left to get the Freezeezy Peak witch switch Jiggy at this time, but I'd come back for it. I then went to Mumbo's mountain and finally beat Clanker to 100% that level, using an additional 8 eggs. After this, it was finally time. I went to Treasure Trove Cove, used 2 eggs to patch Leaky the bucket, and then I went into the sandcastle. The first time inside I had to enter Banjo-Kazooie to get the regular Jiggy, but after that all I had to do was leave and re-enter in order to input the cheat codes. First I doubled all my red and gold feathers, and then I used an additional cheat code, Banjo begs for lots of eggs, to give myself infinite eggs. The first time I entered this cheat code I must have entered it wrong as I wasted my eggs, so I turned on the music so I could very clearly hear the moos which accompany the cheat inputs. With full feathers of both colours and infinite eggs, I continued onwards to my last revisit at Gobi's Valley. If I get all the Jiggies, including the witch switch and at least 95 notes, I can not only unlock the final boss, but also unlock double health, which I often need as I've always found the Grunty fight to be really tough. In Gobi's Valley, once again I set about collecting everything. I had an early reset trying to jump between the 2 pillars in front of Jinxie the Sphinxy, so instead I did them one at a time by climbing the Sphinx twice. I then collected everything else, saving the pyramid in the middle for last. In the central pyramid I hit the witch switch, got up to 100 notes, and got the second to last Jiggy from the sarcophagus. All that remained was that last Jinjo. So when that gold feather text popped up, I was really actually quite shocked. I'm not sure I ever realised I was a gold feather in the pot with the Jinjo, to the point where I actually went and looked it up and, yep, there's not only 1, but 2. This threw off my calculations a bit, as I'd aimed to finish on 98 Jiggies and get double health. So I had to rethink. As this one is now marked impossible, can I do something else? In my desperation when I reset, I instead went to Bubble Gloop Swamp, and despite falling a few times, I actually got the second time Jiggy with some careful jumping between the eggs. It definitely made it more of a challenge though. After that I went back to Gobi's Valley one final time, and got all 100 notes and all but 1 Jiggy, as I couldn't collect all 5 Jinjos. I then collected the final lair Jiggies from Gobi's Valley, and the one I hadn't collected earlier from Freezeezy Peak. With this I had 98 Jiggies, enough for double health, 887 notes, and 19 empty honeycombs. I have used a total of 72 eggs, 33 red feathers, and no gold feathers. On purpose. I did use 1 by accident. I definitely could have done it using less eggs, but I got a bit sloppy now I have an infinite amount. Grunty's Furnace Fun is the same as usual because there are no eggs or feathers. I actually noticed that even in the time challenges like the big boombox battle, where in the main game you would find eggs lining the edge of the arena, in this mode there are none. With some trivia answering I made it across and saved Tootie. After the credits roll, Tootie tells us to finish the job. And that's just what I intend to do. I now have surplus feathers and eggs, which is really useful, as I'm pretty bad at doing this fight with any accuracy. I opened the door to the final jigsaw for double health, and I headed up to Grunty. So the final battle went about as usual, but with some extra effort to avoid the edges, where Grunty had placed some deadly eggs and feathers waiting to trap me. It was by far not my cleanest Grunty battle, but it wasn't my worst. It played out like usual, and the Ginginator sent Grunty falling off the tower. And like that, the run was finally over. In the end I used 133 blue eggs, 85 red feathers due to some trouble beak bombing Grunty, and 3 gold feathers, 2 of which were even on purpose. It's worth noting that had I been able to get the final Cheeto code, I'd have had more than enough eggs to beat the game. So just for proof that I didn't actually collect any eggs or feathers, here is some sped up footage of the game resetting, and then I head straight over to Clanker's Cavern, where I then collect some feathers and eggs to trigger that text for the first time pickup. It was the earliest place I could think to go to where all 3 types are kinda near each other. So, with the run over, let's summarise some of our discoveries. You can get enough notes to beat the game without using a single feather, but you can't get enough Jiggies. The same can't be said for eggs, where I needed quite a few to even get to Click Clock Wood. However, given some of the later Jiggies that I collected, didn't actually involve using any eggs. Maybe this could be done differently in a fresh run. Could you beat the game, or at least get as far as Grunty's Furnace Fun, completely eggless, I wonder? Gold feathers and the Wonder Wing are absolutely optional. This isn't new information to anyone who knows the game, but I don't think I ever appreciated to what extent that was true, even though I did ultimately use them in the final battle, as it makes the fight a lot more straightforward. So to conclude, is it possible to beat Banjo-Kazooie without collecting any eggs or feathers? Yes, but with some minor caveats. It's not possible with the default amounts that Bottles gives you, although you can make it at least as far as Grunty's Furnace Fun with those starting amounts, as it's possible to get the 765 notes required to open that note door. Neither is it possible to do this challenge just with the codes from Cheeto, as one of them, arguably the most important one, is inaccessible without collecting a gold feather. This run, however, is possible if you use other cheat codes. But it depends if you see this as against the spirit of the run, as I did start the video off by saying that I wouldn't be using any glitches. In my opinion, built-in cheat codes are different from glitches, but you can let me know in the comments if you disagree. Overall, we only missed 2 Jiggies. The Freezeezy Peak one possibly can be collected with the right jumps, but the pink Jinjo in Gobi's Valley is impossible to collect due to it sharing space with 2 gold feathers. This was a really fun challenge, and most of that fun was in the discovery and being forced to do things differently and be more careful in a game which I know like the back of my hand. I simply didn't clock some feather and egg placements before, so it kept me focused all the way through to make sure I didn't collect any. Now, if you ask me whether I'd recommend this run to someone else, I'm not sure. If the fun came from discovery, then will it be the same for someone who's watched this video? Maybe you can let me know what you think on that one. I enjoyed myself a lot, and I definitely think there's a ton of optimization that you could do in this run. And you could probably collect more of the collectibles as well, such as those last notes in Click Clock Wood. As such, I'm sure there'll be someone out there who can improve on the run. Or alternatively, I'd be interested how it changes in a run that uses more glitches and exploits to possibly get more Gs using less eggs and feathers. Could you do it with minimal backtracking? I wonder what other ways this challenge could be expanded on. 2 variations that come to mind if you really want to push yourself is either resetting the entire run if you collect an egg or feather, or alternatively seeing if you can beat the game without any health items as well as no eggs and feathers. So that also means no honeycombs, no empty honeycombs, or extra lives. I don't think I'm brave enough for either of those, but I'll happily check out someone else giving it a go. Now, a lingering question in my brain is whether a run like this would be possible in Banjo-Tooie. I'm not really sure, as you don't get given any red feathers, gold feathers, or blue eggs, and the amount of Clockwork Kazooie eggs required in the back half of the game can't really be replaced in most cases. But maybe I'll play around with that at some point, who knows? It is another game with cheat codes after all, and maybe they can make the run doable. I can't promise I'll make a video on it, as this one took far longer than I expected, but never say never. For now, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in the next video on ABK Studios, where I'll be with Vicky and / or Nick. This has been a fun solo venture, but it's not quite the same without them. Bye! Oh, and like and subscribe and leave a comment and all that stuff, if you want to. Bye!